so erschüttert. Wenn man das einstempelt mit den
Stamping it into the metal imprints it on your mind at the same time.
Es gibt bestimmte Sachen,
I can still remember certain things years later.
daran erinnern.
There's one thing that almost always makes me cry. 34 little children and their teachers were taken from a Hamburg orphanage in one day.
Plus die Erzieher, ein Tag, weg.
Confronting people's fates is one of the hard parts of this work.
Over 100,000 Stolpersteine, or stumbling stones, dot the streets in more than 30 European countries. Each stone commemorates a life which was destroyed during the Nazi era.
Die Enkel,
Suddenly, the little ones ask why they never had a grandmother.
was war in unserer Familie?
The stones lie in sidewalks and streets across almost all of Europe.
What makes the Stolpersteine project special is that it transcends borders. It really is a transnational European project.
This is still an issue for the younger generation. When we look at the swing to the right that is happening all over the world, it's obvious that this problem did not end with the National Socialist period.
Each stone marks the beginning of a horrific story.
It may have ended in Auschwitz, but it began in buildings like these.
This is important for us now, because our democracy is again in danger.
It's painful, and we need to remember it. I think any memorial is very special. I mean, to me, it's a bright, shiny object on the sidewalk, and it brings to mind that these are people that had lives. And I think, you know, for the next generation, I think it's a wonderful thing to do.
Today, 2 stories are being added to the world's largest decentralized memorial.
Over the years, this project has become increasingly well known worldwide, and so the number of enquiries from families around the world, especially of Jewish victims, has increased significantly.
Relatives from as far away as Canada have come for the ceremony.
Then we back in 2017, and we had seen the Stolpersteine all around Frankfurt. And we thought, well, for Georg and Susie, we want to put a Stolpersteine to remember them.
Georg and Susanne, a businessman and a stenographer, married in 1920 and started a family. Things were going well until the early 1930s. 10 years later, they were deported and shot for being Jewish.
We went last night to find the place, and we saw them already in the ground, and we were like, it was so emotional to see it there. No one was there, just us, so we sat on the rock there, and we were crying and just feeling what they went through to be taken out of their house.
I never knew Georg himself, but if he could time travel, and it is truly an astounding thing in terms of connecting the generations and so on.
Most of the inscriptions begin with, "Here lived." But who and what lie behind the names? The Weekly News, a key propaganda tool of the Nazi regime, shows Frankfurt in 1936. For 3 years, Jews in Germany had been systematically marginalized by the state. Violence was escalating.
It was bad in 33, a little better in 34. and really bad in 35. There were very violent attacks all over. It improved a bit in 36 and stayed calm in 37, but then violence exploded in 38, even before the pogrom.
For many, persecution began in 1933 with what the Nazis called a boycott of Jewish businesses.
In 1933, the National Socialists called for a boycott, but there were no plausible political demands behind it. The SA was acting as an auxiliary police force in Prussia, including in Cologne and Berlin, and they enforced the order very violently. This was not a boycott by any definition at the time. It was a siege. Calling it a boycott, which we still do, was a masterful piece of Nazi propaganda.
This led to the seizure of Jewish businesses by non-Jews, what the Nazis called Aryanization. Georg lost his job in a department store that, until then, had been owned by Jews. Amateur footage from Vienna in 1939 showed the mood in the German Reich at the time. Susanne Silberstein's daughter had already moved to Palestine by this point. Early on, she had decided to leave Germany.
And you know, it's very bittersweet in a way, because the daughter was able to go to Israel in 1933. The parents had, you know, the push or the will, or, you know, we have to get out. But a lot of people couldn't. Maybe because of the age, or they felt, oh, everything will be okay. We don't have to make this big move. And they could. There were a few years where they had an opportunity, and then it was gone.
Georg and Susanne tried again with a new business. And again, everything was taken from them. Years later, their daughter wrote,
"When I returned to Germany from Palestine to visit my mother and stepfather in 1937, they told me the Gestapo had seized the factory. My efforts to determine the whereabouts of their valuables were unsuccessful."
Wer kann das wissen? Also das, was die Menschen, die
Who could know? People facing persecution know that emigrating is really difficult. They know they will lose virtually all their assets, but they couldn't know how far the Nazis would go. It's easy to understand why they waited to see what would happen.
Georg's brother managed to flee to Shanghai. Many decades later, a last letter from 1941 came to light.
We found the letter that Georg had written to his brother in Shanghai.
Thank God we are all healthy and well. Everything is normal here for the moment. We celebrated the holidays as we always have. Let us hear from you soon. I hope there is still mail on its way. Your brother, Georg.
Der Umstand, dass deutsche Juden nach Shanghai fliehen.
I think the fact that German Jews were fleeing to Shanghai says it all. I don't think anyone wanted to go there especially. It was a dead-end street. But it was a safe haven.
Das ist der Nothafen. Da kann man dann noch hin.
Georg and Susanne did not manage to escape. As with so many others, their fates can be traced in the archives. The Arolsen archives hold files on more than 15 million victims of Nazi-era crimes. Although each stone holds only a few details, the biographies behind them have been thoroughly researched. Georg and Susanne were deported in 1941 and shot immediately upon arrival in Kovno, Lithuania.
We can't go back and change history, but we can be here and honor them and you know, look at these beautiful pictures and say, like, you know, what kind of beautiful people are you that they were part of Frankfurt?
2 stories among millions and over 100,000 Stolpersteine. The project is spreading across Europe and becoming known worldwide. But how is knowledge of the Nazi era and its crimes changing? A 2021 study of German young people showed today's Gen Z is more interested than their parents were in learning about the Nazi era. More than 80% of 16 to 25-year-olds said it was important to learn about this part of history.
Also ich würde sagen, es ändert sich gerade ganz viel, einfach auch dadurch bedingt, dass
We are losing many contemporary witnesses, which means that we are losing their individual recollections.
dazu führt, dass man diese individuelle Sicht gar nicht mehr so unbedingt hat, sondern
When we can only view history from the perspective of general society, how can people still relate it to their own lives?
auf sich selbst.
Ich glaube, es ist ein Grundfehler der Wahrnehmung zu glauben, die Auseinandersetzung mit der NS-Vergangenheit sehr
It is a fundamental mistake to believe that confronting the Nazi past is complete. In fact, we're just getting started. Projects like the Stolpersteine can help highlight the banality of mass murder, anti-Semitism, discrimination, expropriation, and deportation back then, bringing them right back to where they happened, in people's homes.
gefunden haben, nämlich in den einzelnen Häusern.
Wenn man eben diese Trends sieht,
The shift to the right happening today frightens me personally and many people in my community. One doesn't feel safe, especially when traveling through certain parts of Germany. And I feel this way in the big cities too.
Soll nicht jetzt heißen, dass es das natürlich nicht in Großstädten gibt. Diese große Kunstaktion, eigentlich gar kein richtiges
This is a big art project, not really a monument at all, but it offers opportunities that the large state-sponsored ones don't. Anyone who wants to lay a Stolperstein has to do some research.
Wir beide
They
recherchieren.
have to become historians,
Werden wir beiden zu
which is an important process.
ganz spannend finde, einen wichtigen Prozess.
This includes many school projects.
Ich glaube, 3 Generationen nach dem Zweiten Weltkrieg.
3 generations after World War II, perhaps we need to change our perspective. Being reminded of guilt and shame is discouraging.
Scham schreckt ab. Wir brauchen
We need some kind of positive memory, a collective European memory.
Die jungen Menschen brauchen Inspiration.
Young people need inspiration, role models from history who show that people can act differently, that they can also act for good.
Können.
The Stolpersteine, or stumbling stones, commemorate stories of resistance. Eva Mamlock's stone in Berlin is easy to overlook. Hers is the story of a Jewish resistance fighter. In 1933, a young girl climbed onto the roof of a Berlin department store and painted "Down with Hitler." She was arrested, but at 14 she was too young to be convicted. Just one photo of her remains.
Der Stolperstein für Eva Mamlock ist eben insofern von besonderer Bedeutung.
Gunter Demnig's Stolperstein for Eva Mamlock is especially important because it preserves her memory here in Berlin. There is still no memorial plaque, no monument, nothing to commemorate her at the department store, which was only 500 meters away. Nor is the street named after her.
Der von Gunter Demnig hier verlegte Stolperstein.
The stories of Jewish resistance are not widely known or heavily researched. But now, researchers have been meeting on social media to tell Eva Mamlock's story. This is just one example of many. The Stolpersteine act as an analog link to the digital world.
Ich finde es interessant, mit wem man so in Austausch kommen
It's interesting who you can connect with on social media. When I was a student, I found it amazing that I could suddenly exchange ideas with professors on Twitter. You can find like-minded people quickly, and the networking opportunities are great.
Total gut.
Das war jedenfalls damals ein sehr schönes
It was a very good example of digital collaboration. It showed once again that even decades later, it is still possible to uncover very important historical information and make it accessible to the general public.
Die breite öffentliche Bevölkerung gut aufzubereiten.
Eva Mamlok refused to be deterred by her first arrest. She laid flowers on Karl Liebknecht's grave, which led to her being taken into custody for the first time. She founded an anti-fascist Jewish girls group. Eva and her fellow campaigners were sentenced to forced labor. In 1941, she was denounced and sentenced to death. In 1944, Eva Mamlok was deported to the Stutthof concentration camp near present-day Gdansk. She died on December 23rd of that year from general physical weakness, according to Nazi records. No city has as many Stolpersteine as Berlin, where the project has developed steadily.
Ja immer, wie wir auf Geschichte blicken, hat ja auch ganz viel damit zu tun.
How we perceive history depends a lot on what we are experiencing at the time. It's not always the way we learn it in school. World history is presented differently today. It's not only the story of the great and powerful. Groups that used to be ignored are being looked at, and history is being re-evaluated.
This project is constantly evolving and developing. Requests are coming in from different groups, which is a good thing. Stolpersteine are being laid for all people who suffered under the Nazis, whether they were disenfranchised, persecuted, murdered, or discriminated against. You don't have to be murdered to get a stone. Whether the persecution was motivated by racism, religion, sexuality, or something else, anyone can receive a Stolperstein.
Stolpersteine bekommen.
Two stones that prove this have also raised new historical questions.
In der Tat war es so, dass erst vor
the first Stolpersteine for black people were only laid a year or two ago. We have a long way to go, because their stories aren't known nearly enough.
Viel zu wenig bekannt.
Louis Brody was a well-known actor in 1930s Danzig. He met Erika during a tour and they married in 1938. The threat of Nazi ideology loomed large over everything.
Als die Nazis da an die Macht kamen, da ging es dann nur noch ums
Once the Nazis took power, it came down to sheer survival. The roles started to deteriorate. They got more and more stereotypical in those colonial propaganda films.
Als dann offiziell Danzig in das Deutsche Reich eingegliedert.
When Danzig was integrated into the German Reich, they became German, but then they lost their German citizenship. That meant that my grandmother, as a non-German and non-Aryan, couldn't get work.
Auf den Boden bekommen hat. Nach außen hin ist es auch ein Zeichen.
I appreciate the attempt to publicly make amends in some way for the injustice that they suffered.
In einer gewissen Weise versucht, wieder gut zu machen.
Erika and Louis survived their time in Nazi Germany. Their story connects generations and shows how the project gains new momentum year after year.
The team has always said that we would stop when there were no more requests, but that has never happened. In fact, there have been so many requests that the team has almost quadrupled in size in the 15 years I've been here. When I started, we were working in 3 countries. Now there are 30.
It all started in a small village in the German state of Hessen, the home of artist Gunter Demnig.
As a visual artist, you can work on a symbolic level, but you can also create something like Stolpersteine.
In 1990, he traced a path through Cologne in remembrance of a crime that had been largely ignored in Germany, the deportation and murder of the Sinti and Roma ethnic minorities. This performance gave rise to the Stolpersteine.
In May 1940, 1,000 Roma and Sinti were deported from Cologne, Düsseldorf, and Hamburg. They were picked up by trucks and taken to a transit camp directly opposite the Cologne-Deutz train station. This camp was a satellite of Buchenwald. Without the German railway, the deportation would not have been possible.
The deportation of these Sinti and Roma people from Cologne was one of the first of the Nazi era.
We were transported from Duisburg to the big transit camp here in Cologne, here in Germany and in Poland. Sinti were exterminated in all the concentration camps.
A chance encounter became the initial spark for Demnig's project.
An older lady who had clearly lived through those times came up to me and told me with utter conviction that such people had never lived there in her neighborhood. That triggered a realization in me that it had all started where these people lived. This here lived is where they were taken from.
The idea had been born. Now it had to find its artistic form.
I made the first prototype in 1992. It was a little larger, but it was a prototype for the Stolpersteine. And I laid it in front of Cologne City Hall without permission.
A sidewalk memorial to 500,000 victims. Today in front of Cologne City Hall, an artwork commemorates Roma and Sinti victims of the Nazis. 50 years ago, they were deported to Auschwitz. Artist Gunter Demnig has laid a stone engraved with the infamous Auschwitz decree.
They were going to remove it, but then it became a tourist attraction.
We are incredibly proud that this was one of the first community-led initiatives. It meant we were involved.
Das heißt, man wurde mit einbezogen und das war eben ein ganz wichtiger Schritt.
The genocide of the Sinti and Roma is much less widely known in Germany than crimes committed against other victim groups.
Ich glaube, es liegt auch daran, wie man das in Deutschland vermittelt.
It has to do with how we are taught in Germany. In school, we learn history by heart. This happened, then this and this. That's why the Stolpersteine campaign is so important. It puts historical events into a human context. If you just throw abstract figures around, you don't get a real sense of what happened and what came of it.
Was ist passiert und was waren die Folgen dessen?
For each stone, there are countless documents which record the story of the crime behind it. Most of these photographs of the 1940 deportations from Asberg in southern Germany were taken by those responsible.
Wir haben eine Erzählung im Prinzip von Täterinnen und Tätern, wie sie ihre Tat angelegt haben.
The perpetrators effectively described how they carried out their crimes. It's like the city administration or the police wanted to prove how well they arranged it all. And they did it in broad daylight. Almost all the photos of the deportations that we're evaluating were taken during the day in full public view. So maybe the non-Jews, non-Sinti, and non-Roma watched the authorities doing this and assumed it was none of their concern. All they needed to know was that they were being taken to the east. Did they not know? Or did they not want to know?
wissen können und wissen wollen.
This was just the beginning. In the following years, the Nazis murdered hundreds of thousands of Sinti and Roma from 11 countries.
Without remembering history, it is impossible to combat racism. We have to start thinking about individuals, about people and their fates.
These 3 stones commemorate 3 Sinti and Roma children. Demnig laid the stones in front of the site of the former city orphanage, which stood in Cologne from 1917 to 2012.
In January 1943, the Cologne criminal police received a tip. It came from this orphanage in Cologne. These pictures from the 1920s paint a picture of life in the orphanage at the time. A young girl who had been taken from her parents at birth had spent her life in orphanages. Her parents had been deported in 1940. The girl remained in Cologne until the orphanage management reported her to the police. It was a death sentence for 4-year-old Ilga Grünholz, who was deported to the Auschwitz concentration camp in 1943 and murdered.
I don't know if it's important that it came from here. Where something comes from is not as important as its effect. And the Stolpersteine have an incredible impact.
Some years ago, artist Gunter Demnig drew attention to the deportation of Cologne's Sinti and Roma with a path of remembrance through the city center. His new project is called Stolpersteine and is meant to commemorate others deported from Cologne and murdered by the Nazis.
From the outset, I had conceived this as a decentralized memorial for all of Europe. It would commemorate Jewish victims, who are clearly the largest group, but also Roma and Sinti, euthanasia victims, homosexuals, those persecuted for political reasons, those persecuted by the church, all the victims of Nazi terror. But I never really expected to do it. It was a utopian dream. We all know the numbers. For me, it was conceptual art.
The idea was so compelling and so brilliant that this one artist's project sparked a huge civic initiative. People in so many cities are actively researching, visiting archives, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of volunteers working on this project.
I think what struck people was that they realized that a real person had lived there. And then this project just exploded.
At first, I did it all on my own. I did the planning. Then I made the stones, and then I went out and laid them. Soon there was so much planning that I couldn't keep up with the physical work.
Gunter asked me if I would make the stones that he couldn't manage himself. From then on, for 18 years, I made all the stones for all the countries, in all the languages that came up. Gunter alone laid 7,000 stones in 10 years.
In den 18 Jahren, die ich es jetzt mache,
In the 18 years that I've been doing it, I've made 88,000. The inscriptions are the really hard part. They have to be written with heart and sympathy. That's why it's all done by hand and not by machine. It's like they were killed by machines. So we do this all by hand out of respect for the victims. The only machine we use is the cement mixer. Everything else has to be done by hand.
Das muss so sein. Also Gunter hat nur Deutsch gemacht.
Gunter just did Germany, but then 30 countries and about 28 languages came into play, and I've done them all. Figuring out how to communicate in different languages makes the job interesting too. My first foreign language was Dutch, and then others were added to the mix.
From the start, there has also been criticism of the Stolpersteine. Some find it hard to bear the fact that they are embedded in the ground and walked on. The city of Munich was opposed to the stones for many years.
The Munich City Council has twice stated that Stolpersteine may not be placed on city property. I learned pretty quickly from my predecessors that there are no Stolpersteine in Munich, so I decided to get involved.
A law prohibits them from being laid on city land. So it was decided to lay them at building entrances on private property.
There are 276 Stolpersteine in Munich, far fewer than in Cologne, where it all began. We have a unique situation in Munich. We are only allowed to lay them on private property or on state property, not on city property. This has brought about a level of civic engagement that does not exist in the other 1,800 cities with Stolpersteine.
Despite the resistance, a solution was found in Munich that brings people together without forgetting the fundamental idea behind the Stolpersteine.
The idea of the Stolpersteine is to return people to where they once lived before they became victims. And that has been achieved here in the Max Vorstadt. This borough was the center of Jewish life. Many Jews lived here in beautiful houses and had businesses everywhere. Anyone who comes here can learn that Jewish life flourished here.
These stone memorials lie in front of countless houses throughout Europe. They demonstrate that neighbors and friends must have seen and known what was happening.
Und das würde dem Projekt gut tun und auch
It would be good for the project and for all of us if we didn't only think about the victims, but also considered that they lived here among their neighbors. What did the others who weren't affected do? Who took these people away?
Und wer es war, der diese Menschen abgeholt hat.
Das ist auch was mir in unserer aktuellen Erinnerungskultur so ein bisschen gegen den Strich geht.
Something that bothers me about our culture of remembrance is that while we focus our memory on the victims, we don't look so much at our own past, our own historical responsibility for what happened.
Gar nicht so sehr anschaut.
Die Menschen hätten da noch 50 Jahre gelebt, wenn da nicht
People would have lived there for another 50 years if the police or the tax inspector or the Gestapo hadn't come by.
Die Gestapo vorbeigekommen wäre,
if the neighbor hadn't betrayed them,
der Nachbar geschlagen
if
hätte,
the German railway hadn't taken them away,
weggebracht hätte,
if the tram hadn't taken them to the train station.
die zum Bahnhof.
We have to keep all that in mind.
All das sollten wir dann mitdenken.
In vielen Ländern neigen wir in der kollektiven Erinnerung.
In many countries, the collective memory of war and dictatorship tends to divide society into three categories: victims, heroes, and perpetrators. But that ignores a very important category: those who go along with the crowd, First of all, this accounts for the majority of society in war or dictatorship. And secondly, reflecting on the role of the followers is very important if we want to learn from history.
It is unclear whether everyone shares this criticism of those who enabled Nazi terror. Some residents continue to resist the laying of Stolpersteine.
It's still difficult to lay more Stolpersteine because we always have to obtain consent from the residents.
Artist Gunter Demnig has laid memorial stones in more than 8,000 locations, including here in Hellenthal. Family members of the victims have come from Mexico and the US for the ceremony. But opposition from local residents has prevented some of the stones from being laid in front of the victims' homes.
That was in 2013. Since then, the stones have been kept in a display case in the church. Julius was the only Rothschild family member to escape in 1938. His descendants are still waiting for the stones to be laid.
A local family forbade them from laying the stones on the property. They clearly had no sympathy for the relatives.
In Hellenthal, the local council approved the laying of Stolpersteine only with the consent of residents.
Basically, they shifted the responsibility onto the residents. It's like putting up a street sign or a lamppost. You don't ask the residents for their consent. It's public property.
It doesn't happen often, but it does happen from time to time. Gunter Demnig and our team have always spoken out against it because the stones are placed in public spaces. The property owner really has no say in the matter.
In Hellenthal too, everyone involved with the stones is moved by them. And while every case is different, allowing local residents to have a say in their placement raises questions.
I find it highly problematic to leave such questions of public debate to private actors. Questions about family history should be asked. This means accepting the possibility that your own grandparents and great-grandparents participated in National Socialism, either directly or indirectly.
Despite efforts to come to terms with the past, the silence of post-war generations continues in many German families. If a society hopes to learn from its history, it must question the role its parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents played.
Most people don't want to point the finger at their grandparents. That has become so entrenched that families refuse to consider the possibility of their own responsibility.
The concept of guilt here is very complex. It could be for expropriation, participation in rallies or gatherings, or through discriminating against or insulting your Jewish neighbors.
The Stolpersteine offer a starting point for asking these questions. The project shows, like hardly any other remembrance activity, how much it can unite, connect, and reconcile.
So Sachen wie 2019.
In 2019, I was away from home for 270 days. That's hard on your private life. I've realized that physically I can't do it forever, but I plan to keep it up for a while yet.
The ceremony is never routine, always a special occasion. This time, stones are being laid for a family who survived the concentration camps. Gisela Stern was still a child when the terror began for her family. Her children and grandchildren have been shaped by their ancestors' experiences. Stories and memories they can still conjure.
My mother was a storyteller and a talker. She always talked about all of her experiences, including the camp. Perhaps not everything. Maybe it was too painful for her to articulate it all.
This photo shows the family after their liberation in 1945. Gisela was 14 years old.
She was also quite young. She was between 12 and 14. It's a very strange time to be, in that sort of situation. I don't think she was very in touch with it. Her feelings were, of course, she was aware of the horror. People were dying. She would tell me, a story about, I remember somebody named Eva, who was a girlfriend of hers. And it was the kind of story that somebody would tell about a school friend. They were doing stuff together and they were girlfriends and maybe they were giggling from time to time. And then the end of the story was, and then she went east, which meant then Auschwitz. So it was a way of saying, and this was my friend, then she was dead. It doesn't feel like an end, it feels like an appropriate place. And it's not her that's laying there, it's a stone in remembrance of her. It feels like part of the story.
It's great that there were several groups of students there today. I always say that we're doing this for the students, for the young. What makes it a work of art is not the stone, but what happens. Laying it with the relatives, with the students, with the residents, even if they oppose it. The debate is part of the artistic process.